Begin. Okay, so this is a really, really nice parak. The next couple of parakim are really, really practical and inspiring. Do you hear drilling? Because there's someone drilling in my house. Does everyone hear it, or it's no? Okay, good. So then these headphones are doing their job. Okay, so this parak is really, really practical. It starts off with the words that every person can attain the midah of the Beinoni. It is attainable by every man. Each person should strive for it and not think it is beyond his reach. This is basically verbatim from the opening lines of this parak, that the midah of the Beinoni is attainable to all. Now, first of all, it's interesting because although everybody can attain the level of a complete Beinoni, meaning that there won't be any conflict, there won't be any sinning, not in thought, speech, or action, the Alter Rebbe uses the word midah in this chapter, and not madrega. Madrega means level. Midah is really an attitude. It's really an attribute. In other words, everybody, no matter who, is able to have the attitude of a Beinoni. Even if you're a potential Beinoni, even if you're on the level of a Russia, and then the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain why it is, and makes it very, very practical. This chapter is a very, very practical chapter. So first of all, how is it possible that every single person can attain the level of a Beinoni, or even the midah of a Beinoni, the attitude of a Beinoni? Because the Beinoni does not despise evil. He only controls the expression of evil. A tzaddik, on the other hand, as we spoke about in the chapter where we discussed tzaddikim, a tzaddik despises, abhors evil. A tzaddik doesn't even have an involuntary desire to think, do, or speak evil because he hates it. Something that you hate, you don't engage in. However, the Beinoni, it's possible because none of us here despise evil. Now, when we say evil also, obviously we despise pure evil, people going on a killing rampage or terrorists in Israel or, ISIS and wherever they are. Yes, that's pure evil that everybody despises, of course. When we say evil, we're not necessarily referring to the devil with horns. We're referring to simply behaviors and actions, thoughts, speech that goes contrary to Hashem's will, which we engage in numerous times per day. I do, anyways. I'm not speaking to everybody. We engage in numerous times per day. Instead of engaging in Hashem's will, instead of fulfilling Hashem's desire at that particular moment, we engage in our own desires. We don't hate our own desires. We don't think that they're so bad, right? So Hashem's desire is to make this world a dwelling place for him. So ideally, every action that we take, whether it's permissible action or a mitzvah, it should be for the sake of Hashem. Now, a Beinoni does not despise evil. He only controls the expression of evil, which shows us that it's within all our reach because we're all like that, right? Now, even if there are times that a Beinoni is less inspired, sometimes a person is more inspired when he's learning or when he's at a class or when he's davening, or sometimes the person is less inspired. Nonetheless, every person can control the expression, and the avodah of the Beinoni is not necessarily to despise evil, but the avodah of the Beinoni is sur meira v'aseh tov. Sur meira means avoid evil, which means do not sin, do not engage in unhealthy behaviors, do not engage in behaviors which are not in accordance with Hashem's will. And aseh tov, on the contrary, engage in healthy behaviors, do mitzvahs, make this world more comfortable for Hashem. Because it is possible to act contrary to the heart's desires. Now, it may seem false that, the Yetzer Hara can come in and say, oh, you have to act in accordance with your heart's desires. But no, because our true heart, and we will speak about that today, our true heart's desires is to act in accordance with Hashem. Because, in other words, okay, so let's say we have our Beinoni who knows that it's possible, our potential Beinoni, who knows that it's possible to become a Beinoni. What does he have to do? What do we have to do in order to avoid sinning? What are the tactics? What are the tools to avoid sinning or engaging in anything contrary to Hashem's will, whether it's something permissible, which you are not doing for the sake of heaven, you're doing for your own selfish desires. It's permissible, but you're taking care of yourself, not Hashem. Your intention is for yourself, not for Hashem, or actual sin. How can we avoid these unhealthy behaviors? Firstly, by understanding why a person sins. A person sins for two reasons. And when we say sin, it's anything that hides Hashem's desires, anything that is not in accordance with Hashem's will. So it could be a small sin, an unhealthy behavior, an unhealthy expression, to very, very great sins like murder and theft and whatever. When we say sin, we usually go right away to the big things. But sinning, according to Tanya, is anything that is not in accordance with Hashem's will, that does not reveal Hashem in this world. Okay, so what are two reasons that we actually sin? Well, number one, we deceive ourselves. That's number one. What do we deceive ourselves? We deceive ourselves about the damage that a sin can do, because the damage that a sin does is not immediate. So when something, us humans, we like instant gratification. When the results of something are not immediate, we convince ourselves that it's not exactly like it is. It's not as bad as it seems. We think that even if we sin, we can maintain the same kind of attachment to God. We can maintain the same kind of attachment to Hashem, because the threat of separating Hashem from Hashem is not immediate. Maybe the results will come later, maybe in Olam Haba, in the world to come, etc. Because if something is an obvious threat to your life, you won't do it. If jumping off a cliff will kill you, you're not going to jump off a cliff. And on the contrary, if something is going to save your life, you will do it, while normally you wouldn't engage in that behavior. For example, if there's a fire burning in your home, you'll jump out the window, even though you don't normally jump out windows. But it's apparent, it's obvious, it's immediate. When the threat is immediate and obvious, then we don't engage in a set behavior, or we do engage in a behavior that saves our life, right? So the only reason, according to this first reason, why a person would sin or engage in anything that conceals godliness, any unhealthy behavior or emotions, is because the Tanya calls it a ruach shtus, enters his head, a spirit of folly. In other words, it's insane. It's not your nature. Your true nature is not to sin, but a momentary spirit of insanity makes you forget about your attachment to Hashem, makes you forget the immediate effect of what your sin can do, and therefore you sin. The other reason, and they actually work together, they work concurrently. The other reason that you may sin is because you forget your love for Hashem. You momentarily forget that you love Hashem. Every Jew, now, Tanya goes into great detail in the next few chapters, in the next many chapters, about the different kinds of love for Hashem that we can produce through our intellect. Remember that love is an emotion. So if we use our intellect to produce the emotion of love of Hashem, we can produce all kinds of love for Hashem. And Tanya gives a lot of different kinds of love that we can produce with our emotion, with our intellect, which really help us to serve Hashem more in the way of a Benoni. But every person, notwithstanding this produced love, every person inherited from our patriarch Avraham Avinu a natural concealed love. It's normally concealed. There are different things that Tanya prescribes later on to awaken this love, to reveal a love. But everybody has this love, and it's natural. It's a natural state of your godly soul. What happens? We usually are not in touch with this love. So because we momentarily have forgotten about the effects of sin, and we have forgotten about our love for Hashem, that's why we sin. But interestingly enough, Tanya mentions the most amazing concept in this chapter. Because of the desire that every Jew has to unite with Hashem, to be connected with Hashem, right? Even though sometimes it's not revealed, because of this hidden love, Every single Jew is able to sacrifice his life for God. What does that mean? He's able to be Meiser Nefesh al Kiddush Hashem. He's able to die for the sake of heaven. In other words, if he is faced with denying his relationship with Hashem or dying, he will choose dying. Why? Because that threat is immediate. That is one of the things that awaken and reveal this natural love for Hashem. So I'm sure you all know one of the most famous stories that reveal such a thing is the story of the journalist called Daniel Pearl, who, have you all heard of him? He was a journalist who was not married to a Jew. He went to, I don't know, Pakistan on some idealistic mission. He wanted to report on the goings on over there, and he was kidnapped by terrorists. He was a very assimilated Jew. One would think that he had nothing to do with godliness or Yiddishkeit, right? However, before they killed him, which was televised, actually, quite horrific, they asked him if he wanted to say anything. And what did he say? He said, "My grandparents established the city of Bnei Brak. I am a Jew." Those were his words. That revealed in him the connection that he had, the natural connection that he had, that every Jew has with Hashem, because his very life was in danger. So yes, when a person's life is in danger, a person will remember what they have to do and what they don't have to do to save their life. But usually it's not so apparent to us. It's not apparent to us in a revealed way that our very life depends on Hashem. There are ways also to meditations later on in Tanya that remind us of this dependence on Hashem and that our life is Hashem and our life comes from Hashem. But momentarily, when you sin, a spirit of folly, a spirit of insanity momentarily entered you, and you forget that your life is from Hashem. Because if you know that your life is from Hashem, you're not going to go you're not going to do anything contrary to Hashem's will. You've also forgotten, you also think that it doesn't matter so much. You know, like when you're on a diet, it's something that I mean, yeah, a lot of us can relate to. Why do you eat the piece of chocolate cake? Because you don't grow a piece of fat on your body immediately. The results are not immediate. If the results would be immediate, that boom, you eat something that you're not meant to, and boom, there you get the effects, well, you wouldn't engage in it. You think, you convince yourself momentarily, it's not so bad. Or, I'll deal with the results later. Right now, I want to, enjoy my pleasures, right? Whereas eating for the sake of heaven, eating is a permissible activity, and eating the right foods and for the sake of heaven is really a holy endeavor. But as person sins, because a spirit of folly entered in him, he forgot momentarily of the effects of his sin, which will separate him from Hashem, and also he forgot about his love for Hashem. Those are the two reasons a person sins. So what is a potential Beinoni to do? How can he or she prevent sin? So you can declare to yourself, and this is what Tanya says, and it's actually quite interesting because last chapter we discussed affirmations, really. We discussed how you can, how moyach shalit al alev, the mind rules over the heart when things are clear, when there's clarity. And when mind rules over the heart, how do you produce the healthy emotions of love of Hashem and which cause you not to sin? You think about certain things. Now, this is what it means, a declaration. Tanya says you declare to yourself that you don't want to be like a Russia, even momentarily. Because a Russia, by sinning, by virtue of his sins, he is separated from God. So you can declare to yourself, remember, remind yourself, right? Remind yourself, I don't want to be a Russia, even momentarily to be separated from Hashem. I desire instead to unite with Hashem as a result of the hidden love in my heart, even though I may not feel it consciously. Now, you may not feel something consciously. Affirmations, sometimes later on in Tanya also it says, even if you don't believe what you are saying, you should still say it. Because you know that deep down, you do believe it. Because those thoughts, let's say you ask yourself, okay, what is my higher self in common language? Or as we know, what is my godly soul telling me now, right? So your godly soul is telling you that you don't want to be like a Russia. You don't want to be separated from Hashem. You don't want to be even momentarily separated. On the contrary, you want to unite with Hashem. but you may not really feel it consciously, which is why Tanya says, just say it. Say it, and you will come to believe it. Because it's actually, you have to tell yourself that it's not actually in your nature to sin. Who is sinning now? It's the nefesh habahamis. It's temporary insanity. It's not really you. It's not really you. And then what's interesting is that Tanya goes back to the oath that the neshama takes before it is born, which is in the beginning chapter of Tanya, and we can understand it a little more clearly now. The neshama swears, in other words, the neshama is told to swear before coming down to this world, Tehi tzaddik va'al tehi rasha. Be a tzaddik and do not be a rasha. Now, we asked the question before. What do you mean be a tzaddik? Tanya asked the question in the very first parak. How can we say be a tzaddik? Because hakol bidei shamayim chutz mir shamayim. Everything is destined from above, except the fear of God. A person has free choice. How can we tell a person be a tzaddik? So first of all, in order to understand this oath now, we can understand it a little bit better. Try and be a tzaddik, but if you can't be a tzaddik, at least don't be a rasha. In other words, be a Beinoni, right? So you should try your best, to the best of your ability, to have the attitude of a Beinoni. However, it doesn't make sense that there's this double statement: Tehi tzaddik, be a tzaddik, and don't be a rasha. So at least don't be a rasha, be a Beinoni. But what about the being of a tzaddik, right? Now, interestingly enough, Tanya is not a sefer shel tzaddikim. Tanya is sefer shel beinonim. But nonetheless, many times the Alter Rebbe mentions tzaddikim. He mentions tzaddikim not because we should become tzaddikim, because no one can simply become a tzaddik. Being a tzaddik is really a gift from above. In other words, a person can strive, a person can develop a very strong love of Hashem, the love of Hashem, which Tanya describes as a pleasure, a very delight in Hashem and in godliness, right? You can try, but as long as you're not a tzaddik, you still have the aspect of this, not completely despising evil. But being a tzaddik is really a gift from Hashem. When you do your part, some yichudei skula, some people will be given the gift from Hashem to completely, after all their efforts, to completely have eradicated their animal soul, and they become a tzaddik. But it's like they put in the effort, and then Hashem gave them in return this gift of delight in Hashem's pleasures, even in this world, right? So what does it mean to be tzaddik? How can we become a tzaddik if it's not even something that we can attain? Why does the neshama have to make an oath to be a tzaddik and not to be a rasha? So for the same reason that the Alter Rebbe mentions a tzaddik many, many times, he mentions tzaddikim many, many times, we are meant to set aside time. So let's say the Beinoni, right? We are potential Beinonis. We don't abhor evil so much. We totally relate to evil. And when we say evil, again, we relate to the pleasures of this world, anything concealing God's will in this world. But we can set aside times to emulate the abhorrence of evil in a tzaddik. In other words, we can learn from a tzaddik. We don't have to necessarily become a tzaddik, but we can learn from a tzaddik. We can learn to emulate the tzaddik by doing some soul searching. In other words, finding an aspect of evil or unpleasantness in your desire for pleasure. So let's say you really have a desire to engage in activities which are contrary to the will of Hashem. And that's because you are a potential Beinoni. You like to be comfortable. You don't want to be intentional. You just want to respond. You just want to react, not respond. You want to just, attend to any pleasures or desires that you have, right? Besides for what you tell yourself, by remembering the spirit of folly which entered into you and reminding yourself that, no, actually, you don't want to be separate from Hashem. And also you have a very great love of Hashem. You can also set aside times to be like a tzaddik, to find something unpleasant in what you're doing, even if it's a permissible activity, let's say. to find the aspect of distaste, the aspect of evil to Hashem. It does not have to be done the whole day. Occasionally, it's good to, Tanya said, it's good to sort of emulate that and start to have a distaste for evil. Even though the Benoni technically, theoretically, only controls the expression of the evil, but it would be nice also to have a distaste for evil, an abhorrence for evil, which in the tzaddik is complete, but we can definitely contemplate and have a certain measure of this. And the advantage of emulating a tzaddik in this way is that also another concept that Tanya teaches us in this chapter, a phrase which is called hergel naaseh teva. Habit becomes your nature. When we are not accustomed to doing something, it's hard, it's not comfortable, you're going out of your comfort zone. But if you do it again and again and again, it becomes a habit, then it becomes second nature. And I am sure that everybody here brushes their teeth in the morning and they don't really think about it. And I also have many Bali Tshuva in my classes, and they have also told me that whereas in the beginning of their return to Yiddishkeit, some things were hard, nowadays they don't think about it. So let's say keeping kosher was hard at the beginning, but now it's become a habit. So they don't even have a desire anymore for a McDonald's cheeseburger. It's gone, right? Whereas in the beginning, that desire was there. But because a person, I'm just using kosher as an example because Tanya actually brings the example of food a lot, right? We discussed this as well. But let's say, a person in the beginning really hankered after some sort of prohibited food. If you keep at it and you keep reminding yourself that that is contrary to Hashem's will and that separates you from Hashem, and it doesn't reveal your desire to unite with Hashem because of your hidden love, after a while, you don't even have to think about it. And you hate being separated from Hashem, and you abhor the concealment of Hashem that evil causes in this world. If you keep on at it, if you keep on meditating on this and you keep on reflecting on this, that actually becomes your second nature, and it becomes a part of you. And that is the part of the shvuah that the neshama has to make before it's born. To heat tzaddik, try to emulate a tzaddik. It doesn't have to be all the time. It can be moments. But even though your avodah it's not required to become a full-fledged tzaddik, at the very least, don't be a Rasha. Don't be a Rasha. Strive to be a Beinoni. And if you can't attain the level of the Beinoni, at least strive to have the attitude of a Beinoni and develop more and more Beinoni moments. And the same phrase that we attach to the tzaddik, that this abhorrence of evil can become habit and can become second nature, the more Beinoni moments you acquire, the more you'll be used to reacting in the correct, healthy way in different instances, and it will become second nature to you. And that is this parak. The next parak is also amazing. We won't have a class next week because it's actually Purim, but the week after that, we will have a class, and the next class speaks about growth and speaks about the Beinoni who is considered to be serving God, and there is a Beinoni, as holy as he may be, who is considered not to be serving God, and it's all about the struggle. We'll discuss that next chapter. Questions, observations, takeaways? Chaisar, unmute yourself.
So, are you recording still?
Yes. Should I finish the recording? I could do that if.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second.